This story is the true story of a gamer who aspires to become a NASCAR racer, but his parents are very doubtful of his son's abilities and feel pessimistic about his son's dreams. How will the story continue? Prepare your favorite food and drinks because the story will begin soon. This story begins with a Nissan marketing named Danny Moore who is heading to Japan to present the results of his thoughts to investors in the big company. He thought that why Nissan is the largest car manufacturer in Asia did not have a racer who would raise the name Nissan on the world scene. But in his presentation he showed a racing game called Gran Turismo which was designed with high accuracy, almost the same as a real car. Seeing this opportunity, Danny hopes to introduce the world to the quality of Nissan cars. In the middle of his presentation, an investor asked, "How can you get the racer?" Danny answered, "Through the YouTube platform. All the best gamers in the world will be selected through a racing car game from Gran Turismo. If this idea works, then as many as 191 million people in the world will recognize Nissan as the best car." Actually, if they agree to it, there are many things to consider because this is the real world. There will be people who are seriously injured and need to adjust between the game and the real world. Not all of these gamers can feel the real adrenaline in the real world, but on that day was a lucky day for Danny. The richest people in Japan approved Danny's crazy idea, but on one condition: Danny was assigned to find a machine mechanic who knew the ins and outs of Nissan cars. That same day, Danny went to a restaurant. There he had made a list of mechanics he knew to work with, but from 1 to 9 there was absolutely no sign of approval. That left Jack Salter as the last name. Jack Salter has been an engine mechanic for 15 years and now he works at one of the fastest car companies in the world, Lamborghini. There he is trusted as a senior mechanic. The next day Danny meets him at his office. His arrival aims to invite him to connect with Danny so that he helps launch his goals. But Jack thinks the idea expressed by Danny is really absurd. How can a gamer who used to play consoles be faced with a real car? Still on the same day, that night the entire Lamborghini team was invited to dinner. The owner of the fastest car was a father whose son was a racing driver. With an unhappy look, the young driver kept looking at the Jack. In front of the mechanics and his father he spoke like a king leading his people. Of all the mechanics, Jack was the only one who didn't try to curry favor so that he wouldn't be fired. Unfortunately, the young man's haughty words and a hand on the table made Jack feel disrespected there. In the pouring rain he left the restaurant and immediately called Danny. Jan Mardenborough is the name of a young man talented in car racing games. At the internet cafe where he used to play games, there was a surprising notification coming from the Gran Turismo game. It turns out that it was a notification from Danny for all pro racing game players to take part in the GT Academy event, where there will be a selection of players and later will be trained by Jack. However, this selection is not easy because these players come from all over the world. Of course, this is Jan's dream since he was a child. The day of player selection began. All participants could only use the Nissan GT-R without any modifications. The atmosphere was very tense. Jan must be able to get at least rank 3 to be able to pass and become a GT Academy participant. His passion for the game that started from childhood paid off, not being rank 3 but being the first. The 10 best participants from around the world have gathered at the GT Academy. Each participant is given one car that will accompany them until the end of this academy. There are things that must not be violated, namely, when your car is damaged then that means you have to go home. In no time at all, one by one the participants were eliminated. While in the academy, Jan was a stiff and lame participant. Like a crane learning to fly, she kept falling and became the butt of her friends' jokes, and even Danny couldn't quite believe how she got into the academy. In this academy, there are several assessments such as fitness scores, gaming scores, and scores when using real cars. Until the pivotal moment happens, Jack is tasked with being Jan's navigator. On a long stretch of road, Jan was behind another rider and he was going to try to pass, but the participant didn't let that happen. If Jan couldn't get ahead of him then he would be sent home. The pivotal moment came during the crossing, when Jack instructed him to hit the gas. As a result of the tricky action of the participant in front of him, Jack immediately instructed to hit the brake pedal. But what happened was not as desired. The car used by Jan had an accident and finally hit the road divider wall. During a debriefing, Jack displayed and discussed what happened to him while navigating for Jan. But Jan said that he had braked but his brakes were not working properly. Of course, Jack didn't really believe him. Jan was just a regular console game player. How could she possibly know that the brakes were at fault? Jan still insisted that there was a fault in the car's brakes. To prove his point, Nissan did a test drive on Jan's car. This was completely unknown to Jan. How very surprised Jack was to hear that what Jan said was true. The brakes were really at fault. During his 15 years as a mechanic, this is the first time Jack has been defeated in theory and practice by a gamer. The deciding day has come. There are only 5 participants left. There are only 3 people who will be included as real racers through this game. One will be the main driver, and he is the one who managed to get the first place, while the second and third place will be the driver filling the reserve position. On the first lap, Jan managed to occupy the third place. It has reached lap 7. Jan's position is still stuck in third place. In this event, all investors are invited to see firsthand the talent of gamers who cannot be underestimated. Towards the final lap, one by one the players were passed by Jan, until finally he occupied the second position. The battle for first place was so heated, corner after corner had been passed and finally arrived at the finish line. Everyone didn't know who the winner was. When Jack looked back at the replay, he clearly saw that Jan was the winner. But wait a minute, when he wanted to announce the winner, Danny asked to postpone it for a while. Of course, this made investors wonder what was going on. Apparently Danny tried to convince Jack with various perspectives so that Jan did not win, on the grounds that Jan was not really ready for all this. Danny was afraid that when Jan would win, then he would feel very disadvantaged in every way. But Jack could not be compromised about something like this. Honesty is an important currency for him, especially since Jack already knows Jan's true abilities. Just for information, in order to queue in the real fight, the players must get an FIA license. Getting this license is not easy. It takes hard work because it is different from other racing. Participants will compete in several countries, at least have to get rank 5 or above to pass, while other participants who have obtained a license still follow this to get a serial number when the real racing starts. The first race started in Austria. There were 16 drivers and 22 laps to go. On the first lap, Jan was in 14th position. As a gamer, this was the first time Jan had ever done racing in his life. Naturally, if he felt nervous, ups and downs and rankings happened. On lap 20 it was time to refuel. Jan was behind. This was not a problem for him. He quickly stepped on the gas and managed to gather with his opponents earlier, even though he was now in 16th place. It didn't take so long for Jan to overtake his rivals one by one and was now in 5th position. When going to get the 4th position, the position was already occupied by the Lamborghini team, Nicolas Kappa. The skills possessed by Jan are already equivalent to professional racers, but when he was already in 4th position, Kappa from Lamborghini did not accept his defeat. He increased his speed and pushed Jan's car at the back at high speed. The result was that Jan's car skidded and he finished in 27th position. The journey is not over yet. There are still other races: Germany, Italy, Istanbul, Spain, Dubai. The battle was fierce in the United Arab Emirates. Nicolas Kappa cornered Jan along the way. Kappa thought this would be difficult for Jan, because this kind of situation has never been experienced by him while playing the game. However, Kappa's expectations were wrong. Jan deliberately hit the brakes so that his car slowed down and increased speed back when on the corner. As a result, Kappa was passed and Jan entered in 4th position. Not finished until here, Jan's emotions exploded even more. He did not want to lose. Pressing the gas pedal to the end, Kappa managed to pass Jan. But Kappa did not realize that there was another car in front of Jan, so Kappa received his own karma. His car collided with another racer. The race in the United Arab Emirates was the deciding factor as to whether or not Jan would get his FIA license. An opportunity like this won't come a second time. With a cracked windshield that interfered with forward vision, it didn't make it difficult for Jan, but it was a motivation for him. The final lap was just around the corner, with another driver now right next to Jan. The two of them battled it out for 4th place, and finally the result was positive. Jan managed to occupy the 4th position after winning narrowly with his rival. After successfully obtaining an FIA license, Nissan teamed up with Jan by making him a driver for Nissan. The next battle began. This time the race was held in Germany, the Nürburgring. This time the race was for sequence numbers, or what is called a qualifying session. Every track in every country has its own uniqueness and challenges. This was not the first time Jan had tried the German arena. Germany is famous for its uphill tracks. This was quite challenging for all participants. On lap 6, Jan managed to occupy the 5th position. Every corner Jan was always ahead of one car. Corner after corner 4 cars passed. Now he is in 2nd position. Jan's distance was very close, and he continued to increase his speed so that he forgot that in front of him there was a small hill. As a result, his car flew and could not be controlled. Jan had a single accident, and the car went off the track. Suddenly his parents, who were watching him, were shocked and cried seeing the condition of their son. Jan suffered serious injuries and was severely traumatized. As a result of the accident, Jan had wanted to retire early as a racer, but Jack was not a person who just gave up. He had a way to restore Jan's psychology to normal. In the afternoon, Jack took Jan to tour the arena where the accident occurred. There Jack asked Jan to bring the car and finish the last lap that Jan did not finish. Finally arriving at the decisive race. This race is quite unique because it is not the number of laps that determines. Rather, participants would cross the track for 24 hours without stopping. Therefore, 2 reserve players who were ranked second and third were called up. They took turns being the drivers, and the difference is, usually they use Nissan GT-R cars, but this time they use supercars. 10 times faster than the Nissan GT-R, they will face all obstacles and weather including drowsiness. The track chosen was Le Mans, which is in the city of Paris. Before he started racing, his father came to see him and cried, because his father never thought that his son's career journey was so far that he could compete with other professional racers. Even though his son is just an ordinary gamer, with the support of his family, his father hopes that Jan can finish this match safely unlike before. It didn't take long for the match to start. Not even 1 hour the participants had experienced problems with their cars until the worst was when Jan had entered third position and was about to overtake number 2. An inevitable accident occurred in front of Jan's eyes. The red car suddenly slowed down and turned left. The car caught fire, making the trauma come back. The emergency guide car entered the track, which meant that there was a slowdown, and this was an opportunity for Jan to stay focused on racing. But until the emergency car left the arena, Jan was still thinking about his past, until he was passed by the car and left in 13th place from third. There was no time for Jack to mourn something like this. Jack took a quick step. The remote communication device that was connected to Jan played the song that Jack used to hear. Of course, this made Jan unable to focus on remembering the incident and instead got angry. It was Jack's trick. Jack's request was to vent his emotions into this race. And it worked. Jan started to pick up speed and passed his opponents one by one. Challenge after challenge came, from bad weather to tire locking bolts missing from the mechanic's hands. Of course, it made the whole team including Jan panic, so they lost to Team Lamborghini at that time. The match was getting hotter and Jan's spirit was burning. Before GT Academy, Jan always tried new things in the game. In the game, each track is given a guideline to follow. This serves to guide players so as not to break the rules and not to collide with each other. The line is divided into 3 colors: green for safety, yellow for caution, and red for caution. At certain times, Jan tries not to follow the line so that she can pass other players easily. Therefore, on this track he asks Jack if he trusts Jan. Before Jack answers, Danny suddenly comes to the coach's podium to talk to Jan. Danny asked Jan to finish this track well, because from the beginning of the race to this moment the responsibility of Danny was very big for Nissan. Danny's expectations turned out to be beyond his expectations. Using his technique, slowly his rivals were passed in all corners. From 8th position now Jan managed to be in 4th position and set a new lap record. As a result, the closest battle was between Nissan's Jan and Lamborghini's Nicolas Capa. In the end, the battle was won by Jan Mardenborough, who came in 3rd place. All her hard work training at GT Academy was worth it, even though all the competitors felt that Jan was the weakest candidate at the time. Even Jack and Danny never saw the racing talent in Jan. Through this victory, Jan became part of the history that gamers are not to be taken lightly. Regular training, dedication, and high integrity led Jan to become the best racer.